back to my channel, sports fans. Okay, let's get into this one right here. Yep, JJ Redick is back at it again, folks. And I can't remember the last time I actually did a video on this guy. I think it was when LeBron and JJ Redick was doing their podcast, their fake podcast. I mean, I wish I had the money and the technology, well, not the technology, that's, you just buy the technology. I'm just saying, I wish I had the money to have a fake podcast like, Gilbert Arenas and JJ Redick and LeBron James, the fake AI and the green screen and the whatever you call this thing. When these people really aren't there, all you do is type in the script and the AI acts like that person is really there. And it, what is this thing called? Oh my god, I can't remember what it's called. I can't remember, man. It was real big. They were out there doing, they still do it. Remember, they did it the whole time with Puffy, and people actually believe this. People was really putting out videos of Puff Daddy and Jay-Z and Puff Daddy at these parties with these rappers and these kids and stuff like that. These videotapes, like, how did the public, each person in the public, get these videotapes? It was crazy, and people actually believe this. God, I forget what it's called. I'll remember it later. But this is what they do now. This technology's been out for years with the government. And I kind of caught on to it. The NBA does it too. If you look at it, most of those press conferences, post games, are fake. They're not even real. We won't get too deep into that. That's a whole different can of worms right there, folks. You live in a crazy world that's full of deception. So yeah, JJ Redick, he blames the downfall of the NBA on the media and social media. That we don't talk good about the game. We don't. What is this guy talking about? And at one point he said something about he was part of the media, and that these players today are more skilled. Okay, we heard that from you. And the teams are better today than 18 years ago. We basically heard that from you in your podcast and on ESPN. Folks, Merry Christmas. This is the gift the NBA that doesn't keep giving. It just doesn't. It's not giving us nothing. And before we get deep into the NBA, let's understand that this is like this across the board in all avenues of entertainment. Not just the NBA, everything in general. When we talk about movies, music, sports, and things like that, it's the same thing. Not as far as people fighting per se. I'm talking about the product is at an all-time low. And when I talk about at an all-time low, it would be foolish to compare what's going on as far as pop culture to the 40s or the 30s or the 20s and say today it's as bad as the 20s or the 30s or the 40s it wouldn't be fair to those eras. You know why? Because those eras always one up the past era, right? So let's just start from the 20s, right? The 20s had their own thing. And when you went into the 30s was like, okay, we're going to make things better as far as pop culture, music, movies in some way. Maybe they had more theater than movies. Sports, if they had some type of sports then. And then when we got into the 40s, the same thing. And when we got into the 50s, the same thing. When we got into the 60s, the same thing. In the 70s, in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And I'm trying to tell you folks, this stuff started going down in the 2010s. And to me, it was about 2012. And to me, it's no coincidence that the Mayans everybody thought the world was going to end in 2012. But people said no, the world wasn't going to end. The world was going to start going backwards. Now, whatever that means, I'm not too sure. I know what backward means. But when you look at 2000 in the 2010s, or what I want to say about the 2012, when I look at like sports and music, at least, to me it did. Now movies are up for question, but we know the 2010s, as far as movies, was not better than the 2000s, folks, and the damn sure weren't better than the 90s, the 80s, and then when we get the 70s, the 60s, and when you start saying, well, look at the technology, in, you know, it's better stuff in comparison in the 2010s and the 2020s, you know, than the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s. You're not comparing that right. You can't do it like that, because you in the 2020s is supposed to be better than the 2010s, and you in the 2010s, as far as pop culture, is supposed to be better than the 2000s, right? I'm not going to sit here and say yes, the 90s was better than the 50s. That would be stupid, because what I'm trying to say is, folks, you got to take the torch, and you're supposed to carry on the legacy of your past era and make things better. You see what I'm saying? See, for the young people in the 2020s, it might be hard for them to understand this stuff, because for them, the 2020s isn't better than the 2010s, and that's not saying much, because the 2010s wasn't that good. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at the movies, the music, the fashion, the sports, how everything was in the 2010s. Comedy, I mean, in the 2000s. If you don't think the 2000s were way better than the 2010s, you must be a fool. To me, the 2010s was really the grand finale of pop culture in general. It was the grand finale. And the thing I liked about the 2000s, it reminded me of the 80s, because the music was so, what do you want to call it? So diverse. It reminded me of the 80s. Now, was it better than the 80s? No, I don't think so. The 80s was the best pop culture of all time. We never seen nothing like that. When we talk about rock, we talk about blues, jazz, R&B, pop music, country music. When we get into some of the movies that was there, the movie stars, you know, most of those movie stars and musicians went into the 90s too. We got to understand that. In the sports that was going on, and who was winning the championships and the competition, and some of those, you know, sports players went into the 90s. So pop culture as a whole, fashion, the 80s was the greatest of all time, folks. And we were lucky, because you know, some of those people that came into, you know, like the 80s, as far as pop culture, they went into the 90s. So they were carrying on the legacy of the 90s. I mean, of the 80s. So we were lucky. And that's how it usually is in every era, you know, every decade. You know, you have some of those people from the past decade coming into the next decade. So it's always good stuff. But what happened in the 2010s that was so bad? Yes, you had some of those people, you know, come into the 2010s, but they really didn't uphold the standard. That's what I really want to say. The standard of the past eras. They didn't carry that torch in the standard that every other era was upheld to make it better. You just can't say that, folks. You can't say that about the 2010s, and now the 2020s is a joke. The 2020s is basically about foreign in all sports, really. Even football, if you look at it, look at these guys' last names. They're pouring in foreign players by the year. They don't open up the NFL Africa and all this stuff. And I don't have nothing against foreign players or foreign people, nothing. But I'm just saying, if this is what you're going to do, those people better be able to support that pop culture. Or that sport. Because Americans ain't supporting baseball no more. It's not American. And you can see that's one of the biggest things with basketball that nobody wants to talk about now. Yes, it's the on-court play, but we're looking at our top 5 players, stars in basketball. They're not American. So we're not really digging that. Whether first generation American or, foundational American. We're just not digging that. So what I'm trying to say is, with this JJ Redick thing, we're not really telling the whole truth of the matter, why the NBA really is like this. And the whole LeBron James thing, it just coincides with his era of basketball. And he wasn't ever promoted as a winner. He was promoted as a guy that, when are you going to win? Why do you keep losing? You're supposed to be that. We never heard that. We never heard nothing like this, folks. I heard all the tapes that I put out with, the 210s, right? It even goes back to 2009, because Skip was by himself without Stephen A. Smith before Stephen A. Smith came in 2012. It didn't went into the 210s, right? And pretty much the thing wasn't LeBron James was getting beat by the better team. You know what I'm saying? Like a Will Chamberlain, like a Michael Jordan and stuff like that. It was that Mike didn't have nobody. And he was getting beat by better teams. And he wasn't favored. But he was just, a player that we haven't seen since Will Chamberlain. But that wasn't the case with LeBron James. Again, the case was, what is wrong with this guy? When is he going to start winning? He's got the best team in the NBA. Back-to-back seasons. Already went to the finals. And you can hear as early as 2007. I think they still had around the horn in 2007. I was going to put that video out. I don't know if I want to waste my time. Maybe I will one day. But they was basically talking about the NBA ratings. No, the NBA finals ratings was the lowest of all time. In that they already needed to change the NBA. Because the defense was too good. They were, both of them were two good defensive teams. But the fact is, the Cavs had no offense because LeBron James had no help. Woof. I promise, I might put that video out. They was already pushing that narrative, folks. And one of the guys on there said, well, what are you talking about? They just played, I forget who they played somebody in the playoffs. I think it was the Suns or something like that. And it was like talking about the Spurs had no problem being up tempo when they played the Suns, and both teams played up tempo like that. So I forget who said that, but they said it wasn't no problem there. And then they went back and started blaming it on LeBron James' teammates that they couldn't shoot. I mean, folks, not only was they capping for LeBron James that early, because he was sucking it up the entire series. I think they were about to play game 4. And they were capping it up for LeBron James. But the fact was, they were exposing how bad that NBA was, folks. It had nothing to do with the grinded out game. Because one guy said something about it was a slow grinded out game in the 90s. And then somebody tried to make it so, oh, well, they had Michael Jordan playing. I thought this was the next Michael Jordan. LeBron James. Folks, NBA fans were not dumb back then. It was like, this is not Michael Jordan. This guy ain't killing it from mid-range. Michael Jordan would have been attacking the Spurs. This was a team without David Robinson. This was Manu Ginobili. I don't know if he was a six man back then. I'm not sure. But this was the same Manu Ginobili, a six man that destroyed LeBron in the LeBron era guys in the Olympics. And this was 1 year off of LeBron and crew getting destroyed at FIBA by some grease sewer workers. Folks, nobody, with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Carmelo Anthony, these guys were coming off 30-point per game years, all that stuff, 25 and 10. These guys were up there as far as superstar status. The NBA was in a bad place with these guys. They didn't know what to do with these guys. And now LeBron James is in the NBA Finals and can't even sell the NBA championship game. Why? Because he can't shoot. Everybody knew to stop the lane, and this guy can't shoot. They already had cut out defense. That's why he made the playoffs for the first time in 2006. Then he goes to the finals, and what it does, it exposes how weak the era was, because he didn't have no All-Star teammate, no Hall of Fame teammate, no All-NBA teammate, no All-NBA defensive teammate. What era could a superstar take his team to the NBA Finals with no All-NBA teammate, no All-NBA defensive teammate, no Hall of Fame teammate, no All-Star teammate? What era could that happen? Could it happen in the 80s, the 90s? When? The 70s, the 60s? Bird couldn't do that. Michael Jordan couldn't do that. What about Wilt Chamberlain? He couldn't do that, man. I mean, what are we talking about? So basically what I'm trying to say is, it just exposed how weak that era was, and they tried to get him to the NBA Finals, and he got there, and it's not the fact that he lost, it's the fact that he melted down. 35% from the fields, like 61%. What was it, like 60? It was crazy. 61% from the line, or 65, whatever. 31% from three, 6 turnovers a game. It was just that 90s mentality type of guys were beating up on him. Like, we don't respect your game. You don't have any game. You're a fake Magic Johnson. You can't shoot the ball. All you can do is dunks and layups while you go lift weights. Sorry, guys, but the people spoke. The people spoke back then. This was still 2000s, folks. 2007. We still had good music, good movies, good sports for the most part, except for LeBron James. Pop culture was still good, so the people weren't dumb. The people weren't dumb back then, folks. We weren't dumbed down off of a dumb pop culture. But this guy who came into the NBA was pretty much being pampered. And again, we've never seen nothing like this in our lives, where we'll sit back and we're saying they're calling a superstar, saying, when is he going to stop melting down? When is he going to stop choking? When is he going to start winning? This happened all the way from basically 2007, even though they gave this guy a pass for getting destroyed in the Olympics in the FIBA. But yeah, this happened since 2007, going into the 2010s. We never heard nothing like this. All we heard was a great player, and we put the winner up on a mantle. Whoever won was a champion. And then they start blaming this guy's teammates. It's just, oh boy. But they couldn't do that in 2009, 2010. It was apparent. By the time we got 2009, 2010, it was no longer the teammates. It was him. It was him. And then if it wasn't enough, maybe he tried to prove it wasn't. It was his teammates, and it wasn't him. So he went and built this super team, and it find out it was him, folks. It was him completely. But we had known it had been him since his rookie year. He couldn't even get into the Olympic Games. Could you imagine Michael Jordan couldn't even get into the Olympic Games against some international plumbers? Against a 6-man Manu Ginobili? And now his guys want to scream, oh man, he was still young, man. What? What are you talking about? You just came in and said you were the biggest hype player of all time. More hype than Kareem, more hype than Jordan, more hype than Wilt, more hype than Magic, Bird. What? All these guys. Off of dunking on Academy School kids. You can't make this up, folks. And he wasn't killing Academy School kids, killing with the mid-range, a 3-point shot, 80% free throw shooter. They had no reason What was it, folks? What was it? They basically were scared to death of Michael Jordan after he scrimmaged NBA players before he went to the Olympics. They were like, damn. So Michael Jordan could have came in, I'm the chosen one. I'm the king. You just don't do stuff like that, folks. He had nothing to prove that. Nothing. And every year they pampered and coddled this dude. When is he gonna grow up? When is he gonna grow up? When's he gonna stop melting down? When's he gonna stop? That's pretty much what they saying. So they had no other choice but to blame his teammates. Right? Because now his teammates are supposed to carry him. And he's been playing the same role since he came into the NBA. I'm gonna do everything. And then in the clutch, I'm gonna put it on my teammates' shoulders to hit the big shots. It don't work like that, folks. You can't get the most points, the most rebounds, and the most assists on your team, and then expect your team to come through in the clutch. It don't work like that. It don't work like that, folks. And if whatever, I mean, Michael Jordan did it for a lot of seasons, but he was playing great competition. And eventually, he had to mold these players, Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen, out of the draft. LeBron James couldn't do that, folks. LeBron James couldn't do that. And, it's a difference between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. They kind of had like similar routes as far as they both were getting the most points, the most assists, the most rebounds. Of course, Mike was getting more steals and more blocks. I mean, well, Mike didn't have the most blocks, but he was getting more blocks than LeBron James on his team, but definitely had more steals. So Mike was doing an all-around game that LeBron James could never imagine, right? Because Mike was actually playing defense as a shooting guard. LeBron James, as big as he was in Cleveland the first time, couldn't play defense, folks. So yeah, they had similar fates, but Michael Jordan, he wasn't trying to get somebody to come to his team, a superstar player, so he can share with that guy. He was trying to, because he didn't want to be like, oh yeah, because Barkley came over here, that's the only reason why you start winning. No, he wanted to mold guys out the draft, and he finally found them. Right? Took a minute for him to wake up, and he won 3 straight championships with him, and that's something LeBron James couldn't do. Since, I don't know, as early as 2006, this guy was getting great players, right? He was getting all NBA players from other teams, all NBA defensive players from other teams, all-star players from other teams. This is what he was doing. Or that's what the team was doing for him. And they still blamed everybody else. Because he couldn't put up the incredible numbers to get his team over the hump in these critical games, in these big games. So sometimes I just think it's better we look at things from a different perspective, and we got to look at the NBA for what it is in today's era, today's pop culture. Today's pop culture, whether it's sports, movies, music, and things like that, it's in the toilet. And it's been in the toilet for a hot minute, right? And it's something that's being controlled by people up top, right? They've been telling the musicians to make crap music. We're not putting anything into music. There's no good producers no more, no good writers, none of this stuff. No good beat makers. This stuff would never be allowed in the 2000s, in the 90s, the 80s. What I'm saying is they took the harmony out of music. They took the soul out of music. It's gone. Movies, Hollywood is over, folks. They don't really have no great movie stars like they used to, and are still trying to feed on the ones that they used to have, right? Still trying to use those old faces. Sports is awful, especially the NBA, and this is the way they want it, folks. You can't try to tell me that a head coach can't tell these guys stop shooting all these threes. We want you to play the Princeton. We want you to play the triangle. No, they're all playing the same offense, folks. I want you to get down in the low post and post up. Nope. 4 guys at the 3-point line chucking up threes. And this has been going on for a hot minute, folks. We need great big men. So that's what it would be. This is across the board. Everything is being controlled. This ain't no coincidence, folks. This ain't no coincidence. They don't want to invest money into anything for any greatness anymore. This is the 2020s that came out of the 210s. The 210s is when it started getting bad. They got dummies that want you to believe these players are getting paid record-breaking contracts for something nobody is watching. Their skill level is at an all-time low. These guys got to retire and put on makeup, read from teleprompters, go coach, go do all this stuff with tens of millions of dollars. They got a podcast during the season to make money because $50 million a year ain't enough. $100 million contracts ain't enough. If you count how many guys done made hundreds of millions in their career, and you see him on TV now, you see him broadcasting, you see him on TNT now, you see him doing all this stuff now, podcasting. It's a joke, folks. It's a joke. But if you dumb enough to believe these guys make this kind of money, go ahead, folks. And if they do, this is the same reason why all the fans done walked away. Because the team, you're giving money to guys who aren't even carrying the league, aren't producing, all-time low ratings. It's the same thing with the music industry. They'll tell you these musicians sold all this music. Is anybody really listening to this crap today? It's trash. It's trash. It's trash. These guys don't even use their own voice today. It's robot music, auto tunes times 20. At least when dudes were using auto tunes in the 2000s, they made it sound good. They made it sound good, folks. When T-Pain came out with that, it was revolutionary. But he made it sound good. And guess what? Everybody wasn't doing it like T-Pain. Everybody still had their own style, and that's the problem, folks. Everything is like a uniform now. Everybody does the same thing, whether it's in sports, music. When I was growing up, if you heard Drake sing, Lil Fruity Drake, okay, that'd just be his thing. Okay. he sound fruity. You can't be a tough guy and sing at the same time. But they would be, okay, that's Drake's thing. Nope. All the rappers start singing after Drake because they would, oh man, that's Drake, man. We gotta do what he do, man. And they said, well, we ain't gonna sound tough, so we gotta sound like thugs while we singing. Even though we can't harmonize, we sound stupid. So they start sing rapping and sounding like thugs with like a mouthpiece in their mouth, so they would sound more tough. And it's what you have now. They got rid of R&B, they got rid of soul, they got rid of rock, they got rid of alternative music to hear rappers sing. This is what you got, folks. They got rid of real NBAs, positional basketball, so you can watch dudes shoot 3-pointers. They got rid of real fashion, and now you just stuck wearing skinny jeans and wearing joggers. So if you really got a man's body, you can't fit none of these clothes. And these people who wear these tight clothes, you don't even want to see their bodies because they ain't got no bodies. So what are we doing, man? It's just crazy how fashion done changed. Like if you had tight clothes on back in the day, it was because you had the body. You know what I'm saying? You had big legs, you might have had a big ass or whatever like that, and it looked good on your body. But the clothes were like still loose fitting in those areas. Nobody wants to see these guys walk around in these skinny jeans today, man. It looks ridiculous. Or tight clothes. Nobody wants to see that. You gotta grow up. You ain't got no man's body. So things were just different when I was younger, man. I don't claim my generation was better. And I grew up in the 80s, in the 90s, and I was an adult in the 2000s. So the 2000s was still lit to me. And again, I'm not claiming my era was better. All I'm trying to say is my era carried the standard from other eras to be better, to carry on the standard, to keep it going. That's it, folks. So the 50s carried on the standards from the 40s. The 60s carried the standard from the 50s. The 70s carried the standard from the 60s. The 80s carried the standard from the 70s. The 90s carried the standard from the 80s. And the 2000s carried the standard from the 90s, folks. When we got into the 2000s, it was no more standard, folks. They just went left. And I think it's because they didn't want to put no more money into things. Those people who were at a high level, whether it was, coaches, executives, movie writers, songwriters, people who made fashion, they were gone. They were gone, and that standard just didn't carry on really into the 2010s, and definitely not into the 2020s. It's been a complete joke in the 2020s, American pop culture. And you can see this everywhere, wherever you go now. People will tell you in our country too, whether it's in countries in Europe, the Caribbean, South America, Central America, or Latin America, Canada, Australia. It's been the same thing. The 2010s and the 2020s, as far as pop culture, has been a joke. And trust me, it's something that's meant to be. It just doesn't happen like that, because the 2020s is supposed to be futuristic, right? That's what we all thought back in the day. Everything was just going to be off the chain. By the time, but we thought that in the 2000s. If you grew up before the 2000s, they promoted like the 2000s was going to be flying cars and flying skateboards and all this stuff that we saw from Back to the Future, Demolition Man, all this futuristic sci-fi type of stuff. And we got here and it was like, there's nothing here. It's the same ish. And by the time we got to the 2020s, it's even worse. There's nothing futuristic about what's going on. So that's the most disappointing thing, that there's nothing futuristic in that pop culture at an all-time worst. We just can't even imagine how bad pop culture is today, because it was always a standard that was passed on to the next era. So we can't, whatever JJ Redick is saying, who cares? This guy is just part of this era, guys, where it has a low standard, and that's it. And he was part of it. This and past eras and all, they can't hold water. The 2020s and the 2010s really can't hold water.